In Manchester, one animal who has helped one young boy is Jessie.
Before we got Jess, we had absolutely no idea that this cat would have such a massive impact on all our lives.
Berman cat Jessie is the Dillon family's pet. When Jessie arrived in 2010, they were struggling to cope with youngest son Lorcan's communication difficulties. At the age of 3, Pete suddenly stopped talking.
We first realised that Lorcan had a problem speaking. It was when he went to nursery school. Until then, he'd behaved normally. He'd learned to babble and say odd words and speaking really lovely sentences with beautiful speech by the time he was 2. So when he went to school nursery just after he was 3, it was a huge shock when they said he wasn't speaking to anybody, he wasn't speaking to the children, he wasn't communicating with the adults. This child that never stopped talking at home wouldn't speak at school.
Lorcan wasn't alone at school either. His big brother Luke was always there to keep an eye on him.
At school he was quite shy, he didn't talk to many people, and wasn't able to speak to his teachers, so he had to have someone else to talk to. And at breaks he used to hang around with me.
I thought he was quite a confident little boy, but when you then see he's going into school and he's too anxious to speak, it is really hard. If a child's sat there quiet, as opposed to another child that's disruptive and clearly got problems, who's getting the most damaged? The quiet one that's internalising everything, too anxious to move, too anxious to speak, to do anything, or the one that's disrupted that you have to go and help. It did go on for quite a while, and then obviously we had to look into what was going on and why, and is it a serious problem? And school suggested selective mutism.
Selective mutism is an anxiety-based condition, starting probably under the age of 5, or when they start school, but it does render the sufferer incapable of speech in an environment in which they don't feel comfortable. They could be a happy, normal child, but they get to school and they're frozen, completely silent, won't speak to anybody usually. It's like having 2 children rolled into one. It can be very distressing for the parents.
And for Lorcan and his family, there was another problem that came to light. He was also diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, where sufferers can have difficulty understanding or showing emotion, and they find other people touching them very uncomfortable.
Lorcan has always been a child that does not like to be touched. It's very difficult as a parent because your instinct is just to cuddle your child on loads of occasions, or on even just because you like to cuddle them. But with a child that doesn't like it, you've got to be really careful, because you've got to decide whose needs come first. Is it you that wants the cuddle, or do you not cuddle them because it's uncomfortable for your child?
Right, let's get your coat on. I want to fasten it up, it's cold outside. Wait a minute, we've got what your things.
When you throw Asperger's into the mix, that is something that isn't going to go away. He's always going to have the Asperger's syndrome.
Jane was adamant that Lorcan got all the help he needed, and quickly. Nursery was a problem because he just wasn't interacting.
At one point, I don't think they weren't even getting a nod or a shake of the head.
Well, selectively mute children can feel very isolated within school. They find it difficult to make friends. Sometimes the families feel isolated too, because they've got this strange child that nobody seems to understand. Selective mutism, it needs to be treated slowly, step by step, with patience, tolerance, understanding.
When people say, wait and see, you might grow out of it. No, they don't grow out of it. You don't grow out of Asperger's, and if left alone, you don't grow out of selective mutism. So he's got 2 massive anxiety disorders.
Jane signed Lorcan up for the local Beavers Club to try to help him come out of himself.
Initially, he was obviously not keen to go because he couldn't speak in these situations. But it's really important for him to go to these things because he's learning to socialise and he's learning skills that he needs throughout the rest of his life.
The Dillon family were coping with Lorcan's condition as best they could. But a new addition to the family household was to change everything.
When we brought Jessie home, I just opened the cat box that she was in and she just popped out. We all just looked at her. She was this little tiny blob of fluff with big blue eyes. She wasn't nervous. She just owned the house as soon as she stepped out. I was quite surprised at how interested in her Lorcan was. He was just besotted with her.
The family already had a dog, but it was only Jessie that Lorcan grew attached to.
I know it sounds really daft, but she does seem to be really human. She just seems to be on his wavelength. If he got upset about something, most cats would run a mile from a child that's screaming and crying. Just sits there. She stays with him. Very, very tolerant, placid cat, as if she knows that he needs her help.
Over the weeks, Lorcan and Jessie became inseparable.
When Lorcan's playing with Jessie, he's like sort of just him and Jessie are in the room. He doesn't mind anyone else, but if someone talks to him, he will like answer. But it's just like nobody else is there with him.
And the special bond they had at home seemed to be having a big impact on Lorcan's confidence outside the house too.
We noticed, and school noticed, a bit of a difference in Lorcan. Slightly more confident. By April 2012, he did start speaking.
So who was he, Lorcan? What's that word? An archaeologist.
To go from speaking to absolutely nobody to being able to communicate and speak to your teachers is just fabulous.
Have a look and I'll come back to you in 2 minutes, okay?
We've heard quite a few stories of children being helped through a friendship with an animal. And there is no expectation of speech from a furry creature, a pet.
I think Jessi-cat means a lot to Lorcan because without her, he wouldn't be able to talk in school probably, and he'd have to have someone helping him a lot around school and at home.
Thanks to Jessie, Lorcan's transformation continued. Not only was he speaking more, but for the first time in his life, he was able to express how he was really feeling.
We were in the living room and Lorcan was laying on the floor with Jess, messing about with some of her toys, and that's when I heard him say, "I love you, Jessi-cat." First time he said it to anybody that I'm aware of. It was just unbelievable, just shock and just a really happy feeling because that's a way of him letting out his emotions.
And Jessie's been able to help Lorcan come out of his shell in other ways. He's moved up from beavers to cubs and is much more confident there too.
When he arrived from Beavers, it was very quiet, and if we wanted to talk to him, we could, but he wouldn't speak back to us directly.
When he got his cat, he talked to everyone, even grown-ups, and now he's just real chatty.
Somebody's got a line, Lorcan. Right, give me your numbers.
15,
Yeah.
48,
48, yeah.
53,
53,
88.
88. Fantastic. So Lorcan.
What he was before, it's a 100% improvement.
Lorcan's had Jessie for 3.5 years now, and his communication and social skills are getting better all the time.
Lorcan's progress with the speech in school continues and he started to do really well, speaking to unfamiliar adults, as well as more to his class teacher, which was great.
And Lorcan's anxiety levels dropped so much that he was able to do something that was, for him, previously unthinkable.
We were invited to watch the class play, which was about the Romans, and it was going to be performed in front of all the children and the teachers and the parents of the class, which was a bit nerve-wracking because none of us were certain that Lorcan would be able to deliver his lines. And then Lorcan came on and did his bit. It was just a huge, massive relief. Little hands did go up to his mouth when he'd done it, and he just looked up at me, you know, I've done it, Mum. But it was just brilliant, massive thing to do in front of quite a lot of people.
And back at home, Jessie's supporting role has won her a permanent place at the heart of the family.
Her pedigree name is Blue Jeans Angel, and I think that she is a little angel. She's just fabulous, and I think it's the best thing we've ever done. The best thing we've done for Lorcan, certainly.